Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today we're diving into the marketing work that it takes to launch a product. This is another show in a 4-part series we're doing talking with product marketing authors. If you didn't catch the last few shows, be sure to get them on your app or on our website. They're grouped together under the marketing books category. Let's get to today's show. Product marketing managers go through trying times, but possibly the moments where these stresses are most concentrated are when their function is initially being formed, and of course, when a new product is being launched. Key decisions are made at these times, and they are extra stressful when you have to make these decisions in a vacuum without a formulated strategy to guide its development. Our guest's book takes you through a dry run of this whole process. It gives you questions that begin at the genesis of a product, following through topics that you ought to readily answer at each particular stage. By testing how well you're able to answer those questions, you can catch any gaps before they turn into stress-inducing all-night work marathons. Our guest is an authority on marketing products. She's taught bootcamps and workshops for global companies and universities such as Harvard and MIT, and she's been a mentor at the Founders Institute. In addition to her 3 books on the subject of product management, she's also written dramatic screenplays, one of which was feted at international film festivals in Beirut and Hollywood. And she's also the host of Gateways to Awakening, a podcast dealing with wellness, personal development, and higher consciousness. Please join me in welcoming Yasmeen Turayhi. Welcome, Yasmeen Turayhi. How are you?
I'm good, Glenn. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Today we're going to be talking about a book called The Launch, a Product Marketer's Guide. We'll get into the actual substance of the book in a second, but maybe you could tell me about the origin of the book. I know that it comes on the heels of a previous book that you wrote and you thought, okay, I'm done. I've explained something, but this book had to happen because you felt you weren't finished, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So my first book, Product Marketing Debunked, was a book that I wrote when there were almost no books on product marketing in the ecosystem. I was really passionate about creating some language to support this role and to really give a lot of credibility to this role. So that was written in 2017, and I believe I published it in 2018. And so fast forward a couple of years later, I felt like the industry had evolved and changed quite a bit. And what people constantly had questions about was the launch process. Like, how do I actually bring my product to market? And the way that I wrote the books really was, I wanted to make it accessible for almost any type of business, whether it was an early stage company, a later stage company, or even folks working at public companies. And so the origin of the book was to make the launch process quite accessible to a large audience of people who are launching products or services or just wanted to understand that process.
Yeah, and it does that. So now I don't want to give it away just yet, but we have to address some of the things that I think companies struggle with to make good products. Just if I can, tell me if I'm right here. The title that's right on the cover is, I think, your way of telegraphing loud and clear to people that if they do have a struggling product, it's likely that there was something that was missed in the process of launching that product that's landed us here, right?
Yes, exactly. I think like a lot of times people create products, engineers or product managers are creating products, and then they sort of bypass the customer experience and they bypass the message landing in the ecosystem and resonating with the customer. And so that's something I feel like is just constantly missed over and over again. There's so many great products being built, but a lot of times the question is like, for who and for what and what's the timing? And I think these are the details that are a mix of art and science. There's always like changing market conditions. And so one has to have a really clear pulse on the ecosystem, as well as an understanding of the technical side of the product. And oftentimes people just don't have that skill set, right? There's usually people that have a very analytical mind who are really good at building product and maybe less, emotionally intelligent when it comes to communicating with customers or communicating with the wider ecosystem. So that disconnect, unfortunately, is pretty popular across the board. And and then there's also a lot of folks who I think don't know what they don't know, right? And having my own consulting company now and working with so many different types of teams and startups, you start to learn a lot, right? It's not when you're working at just one company launching one product, you have a narrow category of experience in that particular product and industry. And so things can be kind of vastly different depending on which space you're in, what the market conditions are like, what the internal team is like. And I actually think like the biggest breakdown is oftentimes in communication. And so being an excellent communicator is, I think, one of the biggest skill sets you can have as a product marketer, and just really creating this glue between all these different functions and being able to interpret what people are saying, what they're not saying, and kind of foreseeing where the bottlenecks, where the holes are going to exist within any kind of go-to-market or launch plan. I mean, frankly, I could go on about this. I think product marketing is one of the most difficult jobs in the industry because your job is never really done. You have to sort of make a decision on when something is good enough. And you could cross all the boxes and still get to launch day and have unforeseen experiences. And it's certainly not anyone's fault, but having a lot more due diligence and thoughtfulness and structure around the go-to-market process will eliminate a lot of these kind of variables that could come into the midst on launch day. And then also moving forward after launch day, there's also a lot of miscommunication that usually happens. Like people just assume, we're just going to get to this launch and we're done and let's move on to the other product. And it's, every product to me feels like a plant, right? You still have to continue watering it, even if it's full bloom. So.
Yeah, totally true. For me, I think the titles, if we look deeper into them, we can see just how challenging the role is. Take the kind of bigger form of it, PMM, right? Product Marketing Manager. So that says to me that you have a foot in several camps here. You have one side of you that is outward facing the customer. But you definitely, if we're talking about anything that is technology-based, you are also facing in towards product management and R&D. So if you put those two separate groups in a room together, there would not be good communication, I wager. You have to be the conduit for that communication. And you elegantly point out cases where there's product marketers who need to coordinate across the organization and do it well in order to be able to get a product out the door. You talk about someone we're both acquainted with, Evelyn Watts, who kind of gives this, seemed to me kind of like a NASA mission control way of looking at each one of the stakeholders and giving them a no-go or a go-no-go, for their product. It sounds kind of hokey, but it's a great way to let everybody know that you, as that central role, are there to give them some of their much deserved say, right? The whole organization builds the product, but it really is the product marketer who's quarterbacking it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people who are in this cross-functional space for a product, right? So there's product, there's operations, there's engineering, there's other marketers. Oftentimes, I create like go-to-market weekly check-ins where we talk about all the cross-functional responsibilities, but I also spend time one-on-one with all these individual functions because all of them have very different needs, very different desires, very different goals for the quarter. And so it's really important to establish trust and to establish these one-on-one relationships and then bring people into this bigger meeting and team where there might be a lot of misaligned goals And so that's kind of the difficult part, is how do you get a group of people who sometimes may not have the same goal, but really convince them that there is just one goal, right? Whatever that is that fits under the company's long-term goal. Yeah, and there's oftentimes a lot of different types of personalities. Every company that I've worked with has very different types of stakeholders and communication styles. And so being savvy enough to really understand how to navigate through the organization is a massive skill set. And that's like, it's a massive skill set, but also the product marketing, other pieces like the analytical piece, the strategic piece, the positioning and framing piece are also incredibly important. So being able to hold both of those things, like the communication and the actual work itself, the actual product marketing deliverables themselves is challenging, and it requires a team. Usually, if you're one person working in that role, you're pretty limited to being able to execute as well as communicate and build that cross-functional communication stream.
You say in the book, and I think this is nice because you're giving us a shoulder to cry on, the nature of how these roles get filled and the way that even our education system and entering the workforce happens. Individual achievement is rewarded, but this is not helpful when it comes to something like a product where you have to be able to work on your own part, but no single individual is going to be able to launch the product on their own. So you let people know that you hear them and that they need to, work on that communication, despite the fact that it might go against the grain of how some of us are wired.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I take like sports as an analogy. When we're playing sports, there could be a star player, but that star player can't be a star player without the rest of the team. And so checking our egos at the door when we go into these cross-functional meetings and really just noticing and remembering that we're in service of this product launch, we're in service of this greater mission and not, our own particular interests.
Or worse, that your opponents,
right.
You're not.
Right. And that's, I think, what a lot of people, unfortunately, in the workforce, and I think most, companies are set up that way, right? That there is only one person who's going to get promoted, or,
Yep.
There's a limited or scarcity mentality. And so that's kind of the opposition to a really strong go-to-market process. Is we need a lot of teamwork, we need a lot of trust, we need a lot of communication. And so if people feel threatened or competitive, then I've seen a lot of situations where like companies even, promote and perpetuate those types of patterns. And so it's just, they need to know, like the people at the executive level, the leadership level need to know that that's not in service to the greater, product launch. And I think in terms of recognition, product marketing is a role where we oftentimes are the mirror of the organization. And so we just open up and show what's not working, what is working in the go-to-market process. So initially, and this usually happens just in the early stages when you're building this out, right? Once you've built a well-oiled machine, it's not so much the case. But when you're an early product marketer and you're trying to build out the function, there's oftentimes a lot of pushback on the process because it's an extra step that some people haven't had to do, or it's an extra responsibility and accountability that they normally didn't have to kind of work towards. So product marketers can oftentimes get blamed for just being the mirror, but it's really that they're just the mirror of the organization. So,
yeah, and we may not like what we see in the mirror, but that doesn't mean that this product marketer is the problem. Yeah, that's a sobering thought. So now we'll get to the actual substance of the book, and it's in a Q&A format. And as you move into the questions that you're going to answer, you say these are all ones that a company needs to have nailed down for products to go well. But you make a distinction. I'm wondering if you can help me here. I thought I would simply hear what a company's go-to-market strategy is, but you make it clear that you think a product go-to-market strategy is something different. Can you help us out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with a lot of early stage companies as well as later stage companies and then public companies. And when people say we need to build a go to market, oftentimes it's sort of like an ambiguous thing, or like we need to build a go to market process for our, let's say, flagship product. So early stage companies oftentimes have one big product,
Yeah,
and oftentimes they don't really have the structure in place to really build out the full company go to market, which is basically creating alignment on the overarching brand theme, mission, and purpose, and building that kind of hierarchy for a number of different products. Oftentimes, most companies are really just product companies. Early on, they don't have more than one product,
right.
and so, right, and so when I usually get hired, sometimes people will say, we want you to build out our whole go-to-market process, right? And that's a very different type of role than just building out the go-to-market for one product. Building out the whole go-to-market process for the company just means that I have to look at everything from a bird's eye view and look at
Right.
operations and customer success and marketing and really look at how all the different layers are fitting together at that top company level, and then how they fit in with the product, with each of the products if they have multiple products. So it can be as complicated as it can get with the
Sure.
go-to-market process. And so most of the time, people don't even know that their company go-to-market is not aligned, right? There's like something on the website that says one message, their decks say another message. They're working towards very different goals and disparate missions, and it's very confusing for the customer. And it's to no fault of anyone's own. I think that process of going from 0 to 1 is just it's messy. So.
Yes, but as you say, if you don't nail it, the lessons are going to be costly and they're also going to harm your reputation. So there's only so many do overs that a company is going to get, particularly a small company where this is the one and only product. So it behooves you to make sure that you
And,
give
and
this information correctly. Yeah.
yeah, and that's actually really true, especially in like companies or industries like fintech, like health tech, where, if it's a marketing tech company, then you have a little bit more leeway on making mistakes.
Yeah.
But in places where you're dealing with people's money or their health, like there's really not a lot of
Right.
room for error. So you have to get it right. And I do think that people skimp out on this process. Like, yes, it does require some investment and due diligence to do the market research, to talk to customers. Um, some companies, I think now actually I'm seeing the trend shift quite a bit the last couple of years, where I think companies are realizing how important product marketing is. And in the past, it didn't feel like people understood it well or understood the role. I mean, Imad Kazi, who's the head of product marketing at Kajabi, would say, we're product marketers, we're responsible for everything, but we own nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a tough role to be in because
Influence without authority.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, and so we're seeing the trend shift though, where I think a lot of companies recognize and realize that product marketing can really make or break their organization. And it's a really difficult role. It should be compensated accordingly. If you have a great product marketer, you're golden.
And I guess if we look at why you would want to put this all into a singular person's role, it's because it's that consistency that you get, no matter which angle you're looking at it from. So that
Yeah, yeah,
symptom you gave of where a customer is going to be confused from the outside, if you do have a single person who's orchestrating all of the product strategy, that will never happen. It should never happen.
right, right. And a lot of times, if there's no product marketer, then people oftentimes will look to the product manager to be the answer to every customer's question, and they can usually do a really good job on the technical side. But I've
Yeah.
often found that most product managers are so busy and focus so much on building the product and working with engineering and also with the executive teams, that they don't really have a lot of time to do a lot of the strategic pieces when it comes to customer facing marketing work. And so the best case scenario is when a product marketer and product manager work symbiotically side by side and are really complementary to each other,
Yes.
like where product management can't get to the product marketing pieces. Product marketing is picking that up, leading, and is the voice of authority when it comes to all the cross-functional pieces and layers. Because otherwise, that what usually happens without product marketing or without that function clearly defined is that most executive teams will hunt down the information in disparate places and sort of point fingers, and it's a reactionary experience as opposed to it being like a really forward moving, strategic, thoughtful, intentional experience, which is where you want to be as a company.
Yeah, so beautifully put. Just to finish on that product manager side, I think you mentioned in the book, this often gets to the point, and this is a great problem to have, but that if a company is growing the product, you can still have a single product marketer. However, normally the product management role will get fragmented. And this is because you have either different verticals that are using it or even different feature sets within the product. They spin off their own person of subject matter expertise who can then make sure that that is grown out perfectly. So this is a perfectly normal thing to happen in an organization, but it makes the point yet again that having a single product marketer who can interface with those people and still bring it cohesively together so that that customer out there gets a good experience, that's why you need it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think as companies, and every industry is different. When I started, I worked in ad tech, and we would launch like several hundred products, sometimes a month. When I say products, it's more like, features to
Sure.
existing products with some new products, but we were moving at, light speed when it came to commercialization and go to market. And having one central point of contact for each product. At that stage, we actually had multiple product marketers who were working on very different products. That's something a lot of companies actually get wrong, is that they think that they can get away with hiring one product marketer when their product roadmap and product offering is so sophisticated and complex, and they have 5 product managers and one product marketer. And I'm always like holding a candle for that person, and just counting the days that they're going to get burnt out, because it just doesn't make any sense. There's no way that one person could just handle every single product feature launch. So as people become more sophisticated in their offering, they need to also expand that from a product marketing perspective, and really, and really track and really also trust that this process needs to happen. It's sort of like, it's hard to explain. I mean, product marketing, let's put it this way, when it's not happening, right?
Right.
The best news is no news sometimes. Like, okay, if things are launching correctly, we're successful. But oftentimes people want to see like more and more metrics. And there's a part of product marketing. It's not like demand gen marketing, right? It's not totally transparent. How do you account for or measure communication?
Yeah.
How do you measure for that? You don't, but when it's not working,
Yeah, or in demand gen, you've got campaigns and they have an end date.
Right.
The product exists for as long, hopefully, as anybody is there and longer.
Right. And I think you can capture all those layers into product marketing, right? Like in my line items, the demand gen piece, the email marketing pieces, the social media pieces all fall into product marketing. And so I would measure all those as like a part of product marketing rather than like these separate functions. Because we're oftentimes in charge of the strategy, at least the way I work.
Yep.
I'm in charge of those strategies. So,
So I'm calling you out here because that's for folks listening, it's a 50-question book, and Yasmeen has just outlined, I think it's question 5 and question 39, which say that the product marketer should know what the customer journey is and know where the drop-offs are happening in the funnel. And yes, this is an influence without authority thing, because there's probably someone else who has whiteboarded that, another person who has coded it into the marketing ops system. Product marketer still needs to be somewhere there orchestrating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes when I start working with companies, that's the first question I'll ask is like, where's all your information located? What can I read? What can I get access to? What customer research have you done? Like, show me all your market research and how relevant it is. When's the last time you ran it? Just so I can get a sense of, excuse me, just so I can get a sense of what they've been tracking so far. So If I don't see it, then obviously it's something that we'll create. And then if I do see it, I like to organize it into a go-to-market tracker so that we're all aligned with all these different cross-functional layers.
Yeah, and there's one area there where so that tracker will get reported up in the organization, and I love this because this just said it so well for me. Any marketer, even a let's call them a PR or a comms marketer, will know that communication be the issue. But you even have a column in your tracker that says, is this a communication issue or is this a product issue? And so if there are like risks that you're flagging, that I can't think of anybody but a product marketer who would have that, because then that's going to trigger conversations within other parts of the organization, back to that side to side thing we were talking about, rather than just up and down.
Right. Yeah. And so when there's a breakdown in conversions, or if a product is not is getting kind of stuck in the funnel, people just kind of assume, oh, we need more marketing material. And so that's just not always the case. Like sometimes there could be a lot of great marketing material, but the product itself has a breakdown. And sometimes, excuse me, it's a mix of both, right? It's a mix of both product and marketing, but knowing where to move those levers is incredibly important. So I like to actually flip the funnel on its side and move through the funnel as like the product buy flow to really understand where is that trade-off? What's actually happening? Like, can we remedy this problem by building out a one pager or a demo? And if we do all those things and it's still not working, then what is it about the product itself that it's not resonating with them?
Right. And each one of those actions, if you have someone who is a good operator in their company, they'll look at each of those stages, and where there's a problem, they'll go, all right, I know now who to go talk to, or we need, this tactic here. But it's really breathtakingly broad to be able to go that way. So yes, if you have the right person and they do things like ask the questions in your book, then they ought to be able to, I guess at the end of the day, understand if the deficiency that's happening, let's say the revenue numbers aren't being met, they'll at least know where the breakdown is. Nobody can prescribe and say that a company will be able to fix every one of those problems, but you're a lot closer to it when you at least know what to fix.
Right. Exactly. And just also creating a space for product management and product marketing to have these conversations. I think that at the end of the day, it's just this collaboration of like, how do we fix things? Like, there's nothing right or wrong, right? If you approach it that way, especially if you're an early stage company or you're newly working together, there's nothing right and wrong, right? We need to create the space to collaborate and move forward together. So how do we create that togetherness? I mean, I remember this Google study that ended up, taking a bunch of data on what makes the best teams. Is it their intelligence? Is it their analytical ability? Is it their background? Is it their credentials? And it turns out it's actually just the level of trust that teams have with each other. It's just being able to trust each other allows for greater productivity and efficiency. And so I can't stress that enough. I think a lot of companies assume that they need to hire the smartest people, or it's really just giving people a space to collaborate, to be in a symbiotic space, complementary space, and to also build that trust that you're not going to just get blamed for every little thing. And I think that's something I see across the board more, let's say companies who have more thoughtfulness understand that process. And then some companies just don't. They're very black and white about their approach to product marketing. And so I always suggest to give people time. You're not gonna perfect this game in 1 month, right? It does take 3 months, sometimes 4 months, to build out that whole go-to-market structure, especially if it hasn't been done before, and you have to really train people in the organization and to show how it works. But I guarantee, 9 times out of 10, actually 9.9 times out of 10, once it's built, there's such a deep level of trust, and there's no looking back. Like I've never seen a company say, oh, we don't need this go-to-market process. And it is an absolute imperative. Once it's built, people realize the value of it right away.
Mm-hmm. I think working from the product management side out, I think you can notice that at least when the person who comes from the marketing side is the term that's often used in the HR circles is a T-shaped marketer, right? So they're deep in their one craft, but of course they have this broad top layer of being able to converse about a number of things sort of well.
Right.
And if you put that person alongside of a product team, I noticed that that's a really good combination. And you quote April Dunford in the book, and she's very well known in the product positioning space. And she says, we have to get to clarity. The customer isn't sitting there saying, sure, I'll roll up my sleeves and wade through your website's documentation to try to educate myself on how this product helps me. No, it's the onus is on the company to go out to them. And
right.
This is where I think it becomes pretty clear for anyone. I would encourage, a top executive, just spend the first 5 minutes of a conversation hanging in with the product team and a product marketer. And you'll see pretty quickly that the product team on their own will never come up with the succinctness and the type of clear explanation that someone on the marketing side with that skill set can have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's frankly, it's a skill set that needs to be developed over time, right? We see what's not working, we iterate, we think about things from the point of view of someone who's never actually experienced the product, who may be very new to the product.
Yep.
I think what happens too is, especially as on the product side, my experience is that most product managers are so married to their product that they can't actually see the holes. Their perspective is sort of, there's like a little bit of a filter. And on top of it, people who work for a company for so long or work on a product for a long period of time, they sort of start at like a 3.0 level, explaining the product or explaining what they're working on. And I think that they end up losing a lot of people in the mainstream. Now, if you have a very sophisticated customer that needs to...
Right. That's an exception. If it's an engineer that buys the product, sure, they're going for the feeds and speeds. But most products are being used not at the 3.0 level. It's normally sold to a 1.0 person. Right. And they just, want to hear that, well, whatever's under the hood, it's what I need.
Right. Exactly. We're oftentimes people will push out mid-funnel marketing, assets as top of funnel marketing assets. And so I always try to make a distinction. We don't want to overcomplicate this right away. But a lot of times there can be pushback because people want to be perceived as serious and they want to be taken seriously. And so complexity doesn't lead to being taken seriously, in my opinion.
Right.
And so especially when you're marketing B2C, business to consumer products, there is absolutely a need to get that marketing, positioning, and framing into the hands of a wider audience.
Yeah, you don't want to go over their heads.
Yeah.
I'm taking a moment to talk about the soon-to-be retired Google Universal Analytics, or UA, which affects almost every marketer with a website. Anyone who's seen it can tell that the new Google Analytics product is missing a lot of UA reports. You may think you're stuck using the GA4 interface to make them, but there's another way Google is giving you your data. They provide access to it as raw data in Google Cloud, and once in there, it can feed reports and even be merged with your other marketing data in a dashboard. You'll be able to show your company the impact that marketing has on revenue and profit. You know your data best. That's why you're the best person to set this up. But you don't have to do it alone. I've reduced the process down to something marketers can do inside of a 2-day workshop. Whether you've installed Google Analytics 4 or not, this will fully migrate all of your old UA settings and get you implemented on Google's stack of database and dashboard tools. In early 2023, the in-person GA Fast Forward workshops will happen in Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, as well as across upstate New York and Vermont. You can go now and see registration details or get notified when it's happening in your area. Just go to gafastforward.com, spelled as you'd say it, or gafast, the number 4, then WARD. Let's get back to the conversation. The one area that we haven't talked on yet is the role of an audience or a customer base. Marketing in general likes to think of itself as, the pal of sales, and they're just all about new business. But you do urge them to make sure that they get a customer input, and that customer input is, that you even need to cultivate. You can't just launch into, go give me these answers to these questions that I have if they don't know who you are. So you want a product marketer to cultivate an audience, have reason for that audience to want to give some feedback. What do you counsel? What are some good pieces of advice that you give beyond the book for how to do that?
Yeah, so customer feedback is so incredibly important. So I've actually done a ton of roadshows all over the world and worked with a lot of different accelerators. And so I've spoken to hundreds and maybe even thousands of startups. And that one distinction of the continuing success of a company is the market feedback and market validation piece. If that is done, especially on a consistent basis, if people feel like they are really working together with their customers, then I often see long-term success. And if companies, don't really value that or make space or time for that, or if it's just an afterthought, then it's very easy to get off track, right? Because we make all these assumptions and perspectives based on what we think the customer wants, but it's really important. It's not, so it's a two-part strategy. Really, it's yes, of course, have your innovative ideas on where you think the market's going, build that out in a product development roadmap, but then also validate that with customers and see what they want. Ask these open-ended questions. I think some of the most important contributions I've made is in creating that process and building out market survey questions and doing these hour-long sessions with customers to really get into their head, and also listening for how they're perceiving the problem, right? The jobs to be done methodology is great. I've used a couple others. I created my own methodology, and it's just been one of the most valuable pieces for a lot of early stage startups, especially to get that kind of feedback. And it's unfortunately a process that companies sometimes devalue, though, or don't understand the value, or don't know,
or say, geez, that's time consuming. Now, speaking of time, if I'm right on this, you do specifically say an hour. You say you need to allow at least the first half hour for people to get beyond the pleasantries and the maybe things that they think you want to hear into the things that they really have on their mind and now feel comfortable sharing. So just that's an important part of the book that I know you had in mind there. Last question for you, and it's something that you finish the book on. You say how we achieve a goal is just as significant as if we achieve the goal. And we've just been talking here about things like customer input. I believe that we may not even be able to get input on, let's say, this product or this quarter or even this year that we are going to be able to immediately monetize. But if we are going to try to make our organizations product innovators,
right,
with multiple new things that we come out with to suit this customer base that we have very deep ties with, I can see the meaning of your phrase. I can see how, yes, we're maybe going to have a mulligan once in a while. Right. Maybe this particular feature isn't going to fly, but if we do it right, if we go about it in the right way, that's a winning formula. Is that kind of the tone you were trying to set there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually borrow Ed Catmull's book. What was it? Creativity
Inc. Yeah.
Where, he built Pixar, and one of the stories that came out of that was I think when the employees were working on Toy Story 1, it was so successful, but they were so burned out that they really didn't want to continue working on Toy Story 2 or any other projects. or many of them didn't. And so I really feel like that is such an important point that a lot of companies miss. Like we burn people out. And I think how we do things and the relationships that we develop in this space and how we move through learning about what's working, what's not working, and how we really support each other to get to that goal. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to contribute to our companies, to our products, to the world. Hopefully you're working for a company that is doing good in the world. And so that's something that I've just been really moved and touched by, that is not really being addressed in this industry. It just feels like we're treating people a bit like machines. And I think
we think it's mutually exclusive with success.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's so important to ensure that people want to stay for the long haul too at companies. And then also this how we feel about ourselves at the end of the day. Like I think that there's, our personal individual sense of self shows up at work. We can't separate the two, although it's been separated for so long. But I think now we're seeing that needs to be
starting. Yeah.
So empowering employees to show up as their best self and to show up authentically, and to also, treat people like human beings through the process, because I think that's, most product marketers I know are completely burnt out. I actually, have my own product marketing podcast. So I've behind the scenes asked a lot of people, and then I've just have a lot of friends in the industry. And I think it's something we don't talk about enough. And so my loyalty is to the product marketer. That's always been my loyalty since 2017, when I wanted to start building material for the space, is that I just felt like the product marketer in the tech ecosystem at tech startups was not being valued and being respected in the way that they should be. And now again, I think that's changed. And so I'm very happy about that.
And the prospect there is that they may be the vanguard of changing a whole organization. That doesn't happen overnight. But if we take product marketers who have such a unique little perch from which to be in the organization, if you can start anywhere, it would be a good place for them to be the ones who feel good energy, feel that contribution can be met, that behaviors and actions actually go together, values are aligned. Right. So, I can tell that the questions that you've asked in the book get to that. And for a person who's really ready to be honest with themselves and the organization that they're with, or maybe they'll read the questions in your book and figure, I'm not in the right organization for this. But the questions do require somebody to look deep into what they're doing. But I think they hold a very good prospect for how to get a good product launched, and by extension to build the kind of company that can launch good products.
Right. Yeah. And I think we all have a responsibility, like especially on the product side now. And we're seeing, that play out from an engineering and product management perspective. But I think product marketers have just as much influence in terms of building out products that are going to be generative for humanity and positive for humanity. So I just think it's like something that we often don't talk about either, that we have a seat at this table, and it's a privilege and it's also a responsibility. And like, I don't take those things lightly.
No, you clearly don't. Yasmeen, if people want to reach out to you or find out about the other books or other things that you do, where can they go?
Yes, thank you so much, Glenn. So I recently wrote my third book on product marketing, and it's called Breaking into Product Marketing. You could find that on Amazon. It's on paperback. It's on Kindle. You could find me on LinkedIn. I do take some consulting projects. I'm pretty jammed right now, but there's always a wait list and there's always openings. I'm always happy to speak and do workshops. So I've spent a lot of time doing workshops all over the world, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Glenn. This was so lovely to connect with you. Thank you for your questions.
Oh, my pleasure. And I hope that the listener got a lot out of this. And I know that there was something that helps make their funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.